Hey y'all, it's Amanda. Welcome back. Today we are going to rank all of the Paradox Pokemon so that you can know which ones to start with when you team build for Series 2. So, just a quick rundown here. We have all of the past Paradox Pokemon which have the ability Photosynthesis, which will increase their highest stat by either 1.3 times or 1.5 times if it's the speed stat. And then we have the future Paradox Pokemon which all have the ability Quark Drive, which will increase the highest stat by 1.3 times or 1.5 times if it's speed. Photosynthesis gets activated by having the past Paradox Pokemon in the sun, and Quark Drive gets activated by having the future Paradox Pokemon on electric terrain. Or you could use the Booster Energy item, which is a one-time use consumable item, which will give the Paradox Pokemon access to either their Photosynthesis or their Quark Drive ability. So we'll just go in kind of in order right here. So first we've got all of the past Pokemon, and then we'll do all the future ones. So first up is Great Tusk. And if we look at Great Tusk, it looks like it should be a phenomenal Pokemon, right? It's got pretty good bulk through its high HP stat, even though its special defense stat is crazy low. It's got an amazing defense stat. Its typing is pretty good for offensive coverage at least. But its speed is very middling. Even in Tailwind, I don't really think Great Tusk is outspeeding something like Fluttermane, for instance, which is super effective against its fighting type. And I just think that overall, it's lacking some coverage that I think would help it here. So if you look here at the moves that it learns, they're mostly all like ground and fighting type moves, which are its stab types. It really just doesn't have any coverage to speak of, really. I mean, it's got, you know, Mega Horn, I guess, which could be helpful against something like Bonnet, which is 4 times weak to it. I mean, its coverage moves, it's got the Elemental Fangs. It's just not that good, frankly. It does get access to Body Press, but considering its defense stat is the exact same as its attack stat, I don't know that that's necessarily like a huge thing for it to have. I mean, Close Combat would probably be better, honestly, than Body Press. So overall, I would say that Great Tusk, while not necessarily a bad Pokemon, it's certainly better than a lot of other Pokemon. When comparing it to all of the other Paradox Pokemon, it's just not that good. I wouldn't put it on a team over something like Garchomp, for example. And next up, we have Slither Wing. Slither Wing, again, same. It's got this very middling speed stat, so it's really going to need some bulk. It is also weak to Fluttermane and without good speed control, you're probably not going to outspeed this. Its attack stat is great. It's got decent bulk, 79 defense, 105 special defense, 85 HP. Like, that's decent bulk, but at the same time, Bug is not like the best offensive type. I mean, it's better right now with Meowscarada and Bonnet being 4 times weak to it, but overall, again, I'd say this Pokemon is niche, but not fantastic. I wouldn't choose this Pokemon over another Paradox Pokemon. If you're not creating like a full-on Paradox team with Sun support, for example, you really only want to have like one Paradox Pokemon on your team because you're not going to be able to make the best use of the ability when you can only give one of your Paradox Pokemon Booster Energy. So I think most teams in Series 2 are going to have one single Paradox Pokemon on the team, or they're going to be a full-on Sun or Electric team. And I don't think if you're choosing one Paradox Pokemon to give your Booster Energy to, I don't think that Slither Wing is the one that you want to do that to. So next up is Bonnet, and we did talk about the typing. It suffers a little bit in that it's 4 times weak to Bug, but honestly, Bug is probably the best typing to be 4 times weak to because it is a much more rare typing because it's overall not very good offensively. Its stats are pretty good. It's very slow, so it would perform very well on, let's say, a Trick Room team. It's very bulky. If you look at the special defense, and HP, it's very bulky, and it has a very high attack stat. And with Photosynthesis, that attack stat is going to be even higher. So on a Trick Room team or as like a Rage Powder Redirector, I think that Bonnet would perform very well. Also keep in mind that while it is weak to Fluttermane, it does get Sucker Punch. Now, Sucker Punch can kill that Fluttermane before it gets an attack off. So I think we all know that Bonnet is just Amoonguss but bulkier and without access to the ability Regenerator, but I do think that Bonnet does serve a niche that Amoonguss doesn't. Yes, it gets Rage Powder, and yes, it gets Spore, but it also gets Sucker Punch, and I think that's the biggest thing that sort of differentiates Bonnet from Amoonguss and makes it better in this meta with Fluttermane than Amoonguss is. So I would say that Bonnet is actually S tier, honestly. I think Bonnet is very good, and the reason it's so good is because Fluttermane is also S tier. I think if Fluttermane was not so popular, if it wasn't so good, Bonnet would be less good. But because Fluttermane is so good and all over the place, I think that makes Bonnet an even better Pokemon, especially if you give it a Terra that resists fairies, something like Poison or Steel, for example. I think Bonnet has an excellent place in the meta right now. So we can go ahead and talk about Fluttermane while we're at it here. Fluttermane is the second fastest Paradox Pokemon. It's the fastest past Paradox Pokemon with a base speed of 135. Its bulk is atrocious. Its HP stat is 55, its defense stat is 55, and yes, its special defense is 135, but that really doesn't mean much when its HP stat is 55. Now, its special attack is crazy high. This thing's a monster, and its typing is excellent. It can hit a lot of other types for either super effective or neutral damage with its ghost and fairy typing, and it even gets access to mystical fire to help it deal with those steel types that would threaten its fairy typing. So overall, Fluttermane is excellent. Expect to see a ton of Fluttermane running around in Series 2. So next up, we have Screamtail here. And Screamtail is very interesting. I think a lot of people overlook Screamtail because its attack and special attack is 65. Like, this thing is not doing any damage, but it's pretty fast with a speed of 111, and its bulk is better than a lot of other Paradox Pokemon, actually. Like, if you look at its HP, its defense, and its special defense, those are incredibly high stats. So while it's not a damage dealer, I think that, frankly, Screamtail is an excellent support Pokemon, especially when paired with Torkoal. It could be a fantastic lead in a Sun team. It's got a ton of bulk. You could not even bother with giving it booster energy. Give it a mental herb or a covert cloak or something to stop fake out and taunt, and it could be a really fantastic trick room setter because it does get trick room and it's super bulky. There's no way you're gonna kill this thing on turn 1 unless you've got some kind of a monster. It's also got some other really good support moves. I mean, it gets Helping Hand, it gets Light Screen and Reflect, so it could also be a fast screen setter. I mean, it gets Imprison, so if you wanted to do Imprison Trick Room on it to help keep others from setting up Trick Room in front of your faster team, you could do that as well. It's just overall, I think, a very good support. Look, it gets Fake Tears, Scary Face for speed control. It is a bulky Perish Song user. It's probably going to be the best bulky Perish Song user in the format. So if that's the type of team you like to play with, you could do something like that as well. I think that Screamtail is actually a great Pokemon. I'm not going to call it S tier. And I think a lot of people are going to overlook Screamtail because of its lack of damage output. Support Pokemon help your other Pokemon shine. I think sometimes a lot of people overlook support Pokemon in their team building phase. They just want to do a lot of damage very quickly, but a good support Pokemon can help make your team more consistent. And next up is Sandy Shocks. Now, unfortunately, Sandy Shocks, spoiler alert, is not a very good Pokemon. Yes, it has a pretty good special attack stat here. Yes, it's pretty fast. And yes, its typing is a very good offensive typing. But frankly, it lacks coverage. It has a lot of good stab moves, which are great, but they do lack a lot of coverage. So if you look, there's really nothing as far as special attacking coverage moves. I don't know. I think this Pokemon could be good on the right team. It might find a nice niche, but you know what? I'm gonna take it back. Slither Wing I think is good, just not great. But back to Sandy Shocks. If you are in need of electric and ground types to finish out your coverage on your team as a whole, maybe Sandy Shocks could have a good niche for you. but I just really think that the lack of coverage hurts it. And the fact that it's fast, but not super fast, and strong, but not super strong, and not really that bulky, I just think there are better choices for your Paradox Pokemon. Okay, so the very last past Paradox Pokemon is Roaring Moon. So Roaring Moon has the same typing as Hydreigon. It's got similar stats to Hydreigon, except that it's a physical attacker. So, you know, it's pretty bulky, it's pretty fast, it's pretty strong, but not overly so in any of those areas. I think the same way that Hydreigon really benefited from terastallization, I think Roaring Moon will benefit as well from terastallization because it will lose that 4 times weakness to Fairy. So I think Roaring Moon is actually a pretty fantastic Pokemon overall. It's got great coverage. It gets Dragon Dance and it gets access to Tailwind. It gets Roost if you wanted to make it like a super bulkier set. You could have access to healing in that respect. It gets access to Tailwind, Dragon Dance, and it gets access to Acrobatics, which actually synergizes really well with the booster energy that it will likely be running. So it uses up the booster energy, it gets the boost to whatever its highest stat is, and then its Acrobatics does 110 base power instead of a measly 55. So usually what you're going to see is a Terra Flying Roaring Moon that runs, let's say, Tailwind, Acrobatics, and then 2 other coverage moves. And frankly, they can be extremely deadly if you're not careful. So I would watch out for Roaring Moon. I think Roaring Moon is a great Pokemon. I'm not going to say it's S tier just because of Fluttermane. Fluttermane does outspeed it. And if you've already burned your terastallization and you've got Roaring Moon in the back, you're dead when you come up against Fluttermane. So I think it's great, but maybe not S tier. So next up we have the future Paradox Pokemon, and the first up we have is Iron Treads. And I think Iron Treads is better than Great Tusk, but it suffers from a lot of the same problems. It's bulky, but not crazy bulky. It's fast, but not crazy fast. And it's strong, but it's not super strong. And it really just kind of lacks coverage moves. If you look here, it's got mostly ground and steel. You know, you've got Wild Charge, I guess. You know, you've got some Elemental Fangs. It struggles, I think, a little bit with coverage as far as hitting things that are super effective against it. But I would choose Iron Treads over Great Tusk, so I'd say it's good. You could probably make a case for it on some teams, but it's not great. I wouldn't immediately think of Iron Tusk for every team, for any team, you know. Next up, we have Iron Moth. Same deal here. Iron Moth does suffer from a 4 times weakness to ground that could be taken care of with Terra, but then you're kind of committing your Terra to Iron Moth every time you bring it, and it kind of struggles with the same thing. It's incredibly strong. 140 special attack is actually the highest attacking stat of all the Paradox Pokemon. 110 is fast, but not super fast compared to some of the other Paradox Pokemon, and it's not particularly bulky, but it's kind of bulky. So there's some things you could do here with Iron Moth. It's definitely not a bad Pokemon by any means, and it does have better coverage, I think, than some other of the Paradox Mons. But frankly, that 4 times weakness is something that I think you're going to struggle with, especially if you don't want to commit your Terra to Iron Moth. And you're going to need good speed control because 110 in this meta with Pokemon that have a base speed of 136, it's not the fastest thing around. So you're definitely going to want some speed control. I think you could put it on a lot of good teams, but I wouldn't necessarily think of it, again, immediately for every team. So I'd say, again, it's good. You could support it well and have some success with it, but I don't think it's great. I don't think it's going to be as consistent as some of the other Paradox Pokemon. Next up, we have Iron Valiant, and Iron Valiant actually has sort of fantastic offensive typing. Its stats are pretty good. It's not very bulky at all, more bulky than Fluttermane, I guess, but it's pretty fast. Its attack stats are crazy. You could actually run it as a mixed attacker, both special and physical, because both of those stats are so good. And it does have a good mixture of physical and special moves in both of its stabs, as well as a large assortment of coverage moves. So I think Iron Valiant is going to be something that's very difficult to predict, especially if you're playing on the ladder in a best of 1 with no open team sheets, because it could be either a physical attacker, it could be a special attacker, it could have just about any Terra type and be running, you know, a ton of different kinds of coverage moves. I mean, it could also be sort of a support Pokemon with wide guard and quick guard. It could really do a lot of different things very well. So I think it'll be more popular on the ladder than in tournaments in an open team sheet format. And I think that it'll perform very well there. Next up is Iron Hands, which we've seen a lot of in the format so far. It's very bulky, especially defensively. Its attack stat is huge. Its speed is low, so it'll perform best on a Trick Room team, or maybe with some redirection support, or honestly, you could even just make it super bulky and let it tank some hits and heal back up with Drain Punch with that amazing attacking stat. So there's a lot of different ways that you could work Iron Hands into a team. It does get Fake Out as well, which is a super good move as always. Like I said before, it gets Drain Punch to help it heal back up. It does also get Belly Drum, so that's something to be aware of. A Belly Drummed Iron Hands in either Trick Room or with some redirection support could be insanely difficult to take care of. It does also get Swords Dance if you don't want to commit to Belly Drum. I think that, frankly, Iron Hands will be difficult to deal with. That fighting type does mean that it's weak to Fluttermane, but you could also always Terra that away into a Steel or Poison type, and it does get Knockoff to help it deal with Fluttermane. So that's something to consider as well. So overall, I would say that Iron Hands is frankly an S tier Pokemon, partially because it's able to deal with Fluttermane and even Brute Bonnet with that stab fighting type. I think Iron Hands is great for the people who want to play a slower, bulkier, more balanced playstyle, as opposed to the very fast hyper offense of Fluttermane. So next up is Iron Bundle, and with a base speed of 136, it is the fastest Pokemon in the meta right now. It's also got a pretty high special attack stat here with 124. It's not really bulky at all. It's got kind of a high defense stat, but just like Fluttermane, its HP is low and its special defense is low, and it's going to be pretty easy to take out, honestly. What we're seeing a lot of right now with Iron Bundle is it's fast, so you booster energy that speed. It'll be the fastest thing on the field, guaranteed, and you just spam Icy Wind for speed control. That's pretty popular. It also gets Hydro Pump as a stab. You could also, if you wanted to, pair it with Abomasnow and get a really fast Aurora Veil up and then just spam Blizzards. You could always give it Freeze Dry so it has something to touch those opposing water types. This is a Pokemon that frankly doesn't really need coverage because it's not going to be on the field for very long. It is frail. It's there for sort of immediate speed control. So most of the time you're just going to catch it spamming Icy Wind. And then maybe some Hydro Pumps, Freeze Dries, Blizzards or Ice Beams, something like that. So I would say that Iron Bundle is great. There are definitely ways to counterplay it being the fastest thing on the field, something like Priority Tailwind from Talonflame or Murkrow, or even just fake it out turn 1 and get your own Tailwind up through your non-Priority Tailwind user. So there are ways to get around Iron Bundle, but it is a great Pokemon and I would consider it for just about any team that I was building. So next up we have Iron Dragula, and honestly, this Pokemon's not that good. Nobody is talking about this Pokemon. Its stats are extremely average across the board. Its typing is like okay, but not fantastic. And it doesn't get like a lot of good coverage move. It's mostly Dark Dragon and Flying type moves, and none of those are even like fantastic moves. I wouldn't put this on a team, frankly. It does get Tailwind, but like why not just use Roaring Moon? At the end of the day, again, like I said before, most teams are gonna have just one Paradox Pokemon, so they can just use a booster energy and not have to worry about Sun or Electric terrain. And I wouldn't put my one booster energy on Iron Dragula, so I would say it's not good. I would not consider putting it on a team. And last but not least is Iron Thorns. Its typing is 4 times weak to ground, but you can always take care of that with a Terra flying type. Its stats are pretty bulky. Its speed is low, but it does get access to Dragon Dance to help deal with that. And its attack is pretty high at 134. So it's frankly, Rock and Electric are good offensive types, both. So I would say that this is a good Pokemon. You know, you could do something like Protect, Dragon Dance, and then give it like Rock Slide and Earthquake, something like that. It could be very strong, but I would say that it's not very splashable. It's gonna need some support to really make it shine on a team. So because of that, I would say that it's good but not great. I wouldn't immediately say no to putting it on a team. It probably has a great niche, but that's just it. It has a niche. It's not very splashable, and it's not gonna excel on most teams, if not many teams. So here's where we ended up on the tier list. Tell me if you agree with these choices. Tell me if you don't agree with these choices and what you think I should change. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like it. I'll see y'all later. Bye!